So thank you again to Neil for making that journey here, and it was such a pleasure. Neil, if you're watching this, it was an absolute pleasure to meet you, and I really appreciate the time, and not only the time you spent here, but also the time it took you to drive here and then drive all the way back again. So from all of us here at Elite Audio, thank you very much. Now, English Acoustics. I first came across this brand a number of years ago because they launched their, at the time, Leak Stereo 20, I would say, themed 21C power amplifier. Now, there was lots of reviews done when this amplifier first came out, and all of them were outstanding, and I was very intrigued because Peter Farrow had taken, and his design team had taken this amplifier and essentially, fixed all the issues that you would consider from a much older amplifier design. And that's not a criticism of the older design, but when you read what the team at English Acoustics have done, it's very impressive. However, before we get into all of that, let's start first of all by talking about the construction and build. The first thing that really struck me when Neil was unboxing these, and literally, as you saw from the video, they come in really substantial flight cases that would, in 1,000 years, will still be here when we are all long gone. And in that part of even thinking about how a customer would receive the amplifier and their desire to protect all the hours of labor that have gone in to create this masterpiece shows that the ethos from top to bottom is about providing you with the best buying experience possible. So if you look at the English Acoustics website, you will see that the 41C that we're talking about here in particular, it has a 2mm mild grade steel chassis, and the base plate is 3mm. It's all TIG welded. Other things like the end caps and capacitor casings are machined and laser cut, and I like that little touch where the capacitor casings at the top, they are laser cut with the English Acoustics logo. Very, very clever. And what I would class as the ultimate in automotive paint finishes. I'll not go into all the preparation and the numerous coats and lacquering that goes into these, but it's extensive. It would take a whole video to cover that. But if you want to read that in more detail, all of that is of course on the English Acoustics website. I think it's also fair to point out at this stage that there is an unlimited number of customizable color options on these. They've got a huge standard range, which should be enough to satisfy most people's needs and requirements. But if you've got a specific color, you want it to match your car, for example, you just give them the paint code, they will produce it in that exact color. And that is massively impressive. There's also the ability to choose different packs where you can have your valves color coded and screen printed to match, or to at least match with your chosen color. I've got to say, fit and finish overall, wow. The attention to detail is incredible. It's one of the best made amplifiers I've seen at any price. It does take you by surprise. The photographs, in my opinion, don't do it justice. We've done our best to try and show you how nice this looks with our video work, but these are beautiful things, and regardless of how they sound, obviously that's the most important aspect of this, but they really, really stand out in terms of build quality. So let's go on to specification, and I've got an email from Peter Farrow that goes into a lot of the depth about the specification and the design process, and why, for you as a potential customer, is vital. So let's talk about specification. So if we just talk very quickly about the technical specs as in power output, this is a 30 watts per channel amplifier. And when it comes to the listening test, I'll cover that particular aspect in more detail. But I want to really focus on the email that I got from Peter Farrow, which goes into a lot more detail than some of the information that's on their website. So I want to touch first of all about the fact that this is a completely British built and designed and manufactured in the UK. Now, the reason I want to make that distinction, and I think it was quite apparent before I got the email from Peter that this was all correct, you will see that some manufacturers will say designed and engineered in Britain. Now, that does not necessarily mean they are built in Britain, and sometimes this can be used as a euphemism for built outside of the UK. So that's the first distinction to make. They are made in Wiltshire. The transformers are completely designed in-house, made in Wiltshire, which is effectively 10 miles from the English Acoustics factory. But here's the real key part of this. I'm going to read from Peter's email because it is a vital piece of information. So, these transformers are designed for a full power bandwidth from under 10 Hz to over 50 kilohertz. Okay? Now, almost every other manufacturer, when they quote frequency response, they do it at 1 watt or less. Now, that's why the 41C and the 21C deliver such astounding levels of bass control, because their power rating is across the entire frequency spectrum. So if you consider that their full power bandwidth, that means at 30 watts, their measurements are the same as other companies that are measuring at 1 watt or less. Now, to do this, this requires a primary inductance of the output transformers of 1,000 henries. Now, I must admit, I have heard of henries. I used to think it was something to do with a child's TV program. Maybe I'm wrong. And it was I'm sure Henry's a cake in Marks and Spencer's. Maybe, I don't know. Put in the comments. I like it when I'm corrected when I'm wrong, but I think it might be. But this is very relevant to the ability and the way this amplifier operates, distinctive to others that are out there. And that's why, and I can vouch for this because I've taken this amplifier home, lifted it. This thing weighs a lot heavier than it looks, and it's all down to the transformers. One thing which is quite funny, I came across something that was called seismic qualification on the website, and I have never heard this term in audio before, so I was kind of intrigued by it. So Andrew, our sales manager, had emailed Peter directly and said, "What's seismic qualification?" So apparently this is for the Japanese market, and the term seismic, as I'm sure you can figure out, is to do with earthquakes. So this is a requirement now for amplifiers in Japan. Effectively, it means if your amplifier ends upside down, when power comes back on again, the amplifier won't come back onto power, or if it receives significant vibration, it will power itself off completely, and therefore will stay in an off mode, again protecting not only your amplifier, but more importantly, the surroundings in which it exists. So that's quite interesting. Some other great safety features: it has got a slow start. Now, for me, I only know of one other manufacturer that does this, but again, I'm sure you'll be ready to correct me if I'm wrong. But this improves the longevity of the valves. And in fact, English Acoustics believe you'll get 10,000 hours with normal use from their valve amplifiers, because the slow start means you gradually increase the power to the valve, because most valves fail on startup. It's that sudden surge of power, that's when the valve fails, because it puts the valve under a lot of stress. Another aspect of their design feature, which I think is exceptionally good, is, from my past experience, and I'm sure there are many of you watching this, and this is one of the things I know for certain puts people off owning a valve amplifier. There are certain valve amplifiers that if a valve fails, it will literally take out half the amplifier. You can call it collateral damage for the valve failing. What English Acoustics have very cleverly designed, that if the voltage, I'm just going to make sure I've got this correct, if the voltage across the valve deviates from standard, it cuts the power instantly. Now, what this means is that you aren't going to have any collateral damage you will simply remove the offending faulty valve, replace it with a brand new one, and hey presto, without any other damage to your amplifier, everything is working. And I think English Acoustics should be commended for this, because for valves to become more accepted mainstream, we all know that at some point you will have to replace valves. They eventually wear out. However, and I'll come to this in the real listening test, but valve amplifiers do offer something remarkably unique in terms of sound quality. And for me personally, a valve amplifier is almost impossible to beat in the right circumstances. But again, we will come back to that very shortly. One other aspect of the English acoustic valve amplifiers is that they talk about filtering, and if you've got a mains distribution block, and effectively you can find you still get cross interference with some of these designs. But what they have got is they've got in their amplifiers and preamps, they mitigate this cross interference by filtering in and out on the mains. Now, they use what's called a resonant tank, which is filtering on the power supply, and this is tuned to the 2 times the mains frequency, so 100 hertz in the UK or 120 in the USA, and this provides extended inductive based filtering at the mains frequency. So it works as follows. The capacitors are traditionally used on amplifier power supplies are called reservoir capacitors, and these generate lots of interference as they charge and discharge. So by using this resonant tank, as they call it, the combination of a custom inductor and capacitor, they smooth the supply into the amplifier without high levels of charging spikes on conventional supplies. And this makes the 41C have a much better electrical manners on the mains compared to other amplifiers. The inductor, called a choke, resists current spikes by storing energy in its magnetic field. So by resisting current spikes, a large downstream capacitor can be used without the penalty of current spikes by adding substantial current reserve for musical peaks, which is one of the reasons why this amplifier deals with large transients in such an effective manner. One thing I would say, based on that information, we would be more than happy to provide a full 12-month warranty on the valves. The factory provide 90 days, but I know from experience that most valves, if they're going to fail quite quickly. Otherwise, with normal use, they will last for years and years and years and years. The other aspect of this amplifier, which is worthy of note, auto biases, meaning you don't have to bias valves. That is great, because it means you have to have matched valves either, so it'll auto bias to the valves you put in. That means replacing valves can be done singularly without having to replace a pair because one has failed. The output tubes are pure pentodes, not beam tetrodes. That gives a linear response, resulting in a really smooth delivery. There's lots more I'm going to here, but I think I've pulled out, I would say, the main relevant points of this amplifier. On the preamplifier, the Downton, I actually loved using this. I'll come to the sound shortly. I particularly was intrigued by the 99.999 RIAA accuracy of the phono stage, and I did put that to test and it sounded great. I like the tone controls, which are plus or minus 12 dB. That is another nice feature. Less than 0.1% distortion on the power amp. Wow. Another nice little feature on the power amp on the back, there's a little LCD panel that will show you the exact number of hours that your valves, or sorry, the amplifier has been powered on for. So again, that if you're thinking about burning, one of the nice features is that English Acoustics run the amplifier for 100 hours before it comes to you. So part burnt in, my feeling is that with most valve amplifiers, they will need 300 to 400 hours normally, and given the high quality of components, you know, things like paper and oil capacitors, silver capacitors, they do historically take quite a bit of burn-in. So my gut feel is this amplifier will not sound its best until it gets to about the 400 hours mark. Okay, let us get on to the important part, and that is, how did this amplifier sound? Well, after we did the initial interview with Neil in the showroom, we went straight in to our listening session, and I'll bring up some of the tracks on screen that I usually do. I've got actually, one thing I wanted to do is I wanted to test it on much more demanding, complex music, things that have got big transients, very congested sound stages, because it's interesting, if you talk to valve amp owners, they always love talking about the mid-range. Oh, the mid-range, oh, it's amazing, amazing. What about the bass? And yeah, so what did you say? What was that about the mid-range? Yeah, mid-range, amazing, amazing. But what about the bass? Yeah, the mid-range, love the mid-range. Wow, that mid-range. And the bass, did I mention I really like the mid-range? Anyway, this has always been, I would say, one of the potential negatives with some valve amplifiers. Not all, but with some. And the bass can become a bit out of control, a bit woolly, a bit over-rounded. So there is a track by Deep Purple on the Machine Head album called Lazy. And it starts off Hammond organ. And the thing I least love about Deep Purple is that they will use a distortion pedal on a Hammond organ. It's just genius. So it starts off, and actually the distortion on the Hammond organ at the start of this track can sound pretty edgy on some systems. Then gets into bass drum, guitar, and there's real, big moments of transient, loud pieces of music where the demands, the current delivery being asked from the amplifier are pretty substantial. And as you go further and further in the track, it builds and builds and builds and builds, and then the vocal comes in about halfway through. Big instrumental to start with, and then it's a long track. It's about 7 minutes long, I think, from memory. Anyway, great test track, and wow, the thing I loved here was the organ sounded so real, and the vocals, the texture, the guitar, which would be Richard Blackmore, and the distortion on that, it just all sounded absolutely fantastic. And then did my usual Sanson Dance Macabre test, got to the transient part, and again, it's passed with flying colours. In fact, I would say, and again, played it loud. In the showroom, we were playing this really loud because that's a great test for a valve amp and its dynamic headroom. And 30 watts per channel doesn't sound like a lot, but in a properly engineered valve amplifier, which this clearly is, 30 watts valve power would easily compete with 200 to 250 watts in solid state. A lot of it down to the transformer design that we've already covered, but this was impressive, I've got to say. We used them with the Atalanti 4s. I also tested them with the Paradigm Persona Bs, which cost a lot more, and you could tell the distinctive tuning of the speakers, if that makes sense. They sounded different, which I would have expected them to, but the main aspect of this amplifier's beautiful musicality remained the same. I also took the Preamp Power home and spent most of Sunday listening to vinyl through the phono stage, and that phono stage, let me tell you, is remarkably good. It's moving magnet, but if you've got moving coil, you can use a step-up transformer to use the moving magnet stage. I also listened to Fink, and there's a track called Trouble's What You're In. Now, I listened to both the studio version, which is actually very different to the live version, and I would recommend you listen to both. Both are great tracks. Studio version has got a kick drum at the start of the track, and what I loved about the way the English Acoustics pairing presented this was it had all the texture and the correct decay of the drum. It just had that very nice, impactful sound. So it had punch, didn't sound, overly rounded that some valve amps can. And in fact, in that respect, the way it controlled the bass is more akin to a really good solid state amplifier. So this was starting to give you the kind of best of all worlds, and this is not an inexpensive combination. I'll bring the prices up on screen so you can see for yourself. However, this started to remind me of why I wanted to get into hi-fi in the first place. I found myself having a real element of anticipation about the next track and the next track and the next track. And it never failed to deliver. I've played some compressed 70s rock, and again, I'll bring up some of the tracks that we used there. And what I found by using the tone controls, I managed to lose some of the compression, and that was a very nice feature. I think the real impact was when we actually took it out again. So we took the system out, and I would say this is the first time, I think, on any of the equipment I brought home, where my wife was literally wrestling, trying to wrestle the preamp power out of my hands at the door to bring them back to the showroom, and literally saying, well, how can I listen to music now after having listened to that? You know, it makes me feel I don't even want to listen to the amplifier that we've got in there at the moment in comparison. Now, it's not a fair comparison because we're looking at something that costs more than 3 times more expensive, but it does let you see just how impactful having this amplifier was for us. And it was so impactful. I mean, we had this on an evaluation basis. We hadn't decided to take this brand on. I know that Stuart Smith and Lynette Smith at Hi-Fi Pig, they got their own custom-made 21C in pink. I'll bring up some pictures of that, and they loved it. They absolutely loved this amplifier. I think I've read some comments online. Someone said, oh, you can get a Leak Stereo 20 for much less than that, and so there you go, get the original. Well, yeah, you can, but it's nothing like the original. This takes the original and improves it tenfold. That's the 21C I'm talking about, which is 20 watts per channel. But the 41C that we had here, I gotta say, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I think it has the grip and control of solid state, but it's got all the advantages of valves. And it's this ability that a valve amplifier has to produce a much more natural sound, in my opinion, when it's implemented correctly. So there's a lot goes into it. It's not just saying, oh, valves always sound better. That's a nonsense. It's like saying, oh, Class A is always better and Class D is rubbish, and all those terms that people use. It's like so generalized. But with a correctly engineered, designed and tuned valve amplifier, the listening experience can be transformative. And I think, again, as I said, it reminds me of what got me excited about hi-fi in the first place, and that was valves. Valves were the thing that really drew me into it as a serious hobby, and then as a business. I just loved what valves did. And I would put this up there, this combination up there, with the best that can currently be bought. If you just look at how it looks when you unbox this, you're just going to go wow straight away, because everything just looks right. There is something about a valve amplifier that I think aesthetically has solid state, can't even get close to it. It's such an aesthetic masterpiece and a work of art, and I love the design of this amp. I think they've got the aesthetics absolutely bang on. The preamplifier is fully remote control. We had a pre-production one, so it didn't have the finished remote, but I can tell you that you can use, you can change the input from the remote and also the volume. Tone controls are done manually. We're in the 12 o'clock position, then they have no impact on the sound. I'd like to have probably seen a little notch there, so you know that that's them central, so they kind of move freely either way. In terms of inputs, you have got a phono stage with, in fact, what I liked about it is they've actually differentiated the color of the RC inputs for that. And then you've got 3 line stage inputs on the back, and then you've got your RCA outputs on the back of the preamp, and also your standard IEC connector as well. On the Power Amp, it comes both with RCA inputs and XLR inputs. It's a fully balanced device. And then you've got your standard loudspeaker terminals for the output, and of course your IEC connector as normal. Again, the fact that, as I say, my wife was devastated, and I will use that word in those terms, when we took that pre and power combination out of our system at home, where we were actually using them with the Atalanti 5. So Atalanti 4s in the showroom, Atalanti 5s when I was testing them at home. The fact that her reaction was so instant and emotional, and genuinely, she just said, can we not just keep it here a bit longer, please? And yeah, that I've never had that reaction before. I'd say my wife's got an exceptionally good ear. Her musical, her ability to interpret musicality is exceptional, and she's also quite quick to come to a conclusion. But the second we put this in, she was like, wow, that, woof, and playing some tracks that she herself likes to listen to. And then I see the reaction when we're going to take it away. That just speaks volumes. So needless to say, I can tell you now that English Acoustics have found their way into our portfolio, and very well earned too. I mentioned in previous videos, we don't take on brands that we've not listened to and tested, and as I said, even taken home, because that's where you guys are listening. You're listening at home. And so we want to make sure that when we're recommending something or bring it into our portfolio, you can buy with confidence from us because of that recommendation. Got to say, guys, English Acoustics, you've done a remarkable job here, and you should be really commended. I think it's a pairing that will work with most loudspeakers. I haven't tested it with a very inefficient loudspeaker, so I can't comment on that. That would be an interesting test to see. But given the design and its ability to dig deep into current reserves because of the transformer designs, the fact that the frequency and testing is across the full power spectrum also is commendable. So would I buy one? Yes, without hesitation. If I had the budget and I was looking to spend that amount of money, that would be right up there on my additional list. So guys, an outstanding product for sure, and I honestly can't wait for our demo units to arrive. We're trying to pick the colour. That's sometimes too much choice is a bad thing. I think there's just almost too much to choose from. So I think we're going to play safe. We haven't decided yet. We're probably going to go for a dark grey metallic, which I think would look nice in any environment. And then we'll get our pre and power in, and we'd love you guys to come and have a listen. In fact, if you want to have a listen to one, we can arrange a home trial, so let us know, because listening at home, that's where you will find out just how good this is. Anyway, that then covers this amplifier. Amazing. English Acoustics, thank you so much. You have done an amazing job with this, and you should be thoroughly commended. All British built, all sourced in the UK, manufactured in the UK, everything is UK, and that is quite rare nowadays, let me tell you. And this is the part of the video where I always have a favour to ask you. If you're enjoying the content of what we're producing, if you like the products that we have brought to your attention, please like this video, but also subscribe. Every subscription means a huge amount to us here. It gives us that encouragement to go and produce more videos for you and try and produce them to the highest standard that we can. In fact, this week, you may have noticed we're using new lighting. We decided that it was time to not use just the ambient lighting in this small listening room and try and make it look a little bit better. Maybe you see the difference, maybe not. I know it doesn't really matter for the content, but maybe it looks slightly better. You can perhaps let me know in your comments below. Please keep the comments coming. What colour would you choose? If you had the free rein on your colour choice, what colour would you go for? I'd love to know. Please let us know. Keep the comments flowing, and we will endeavour to answer as many as we possibly can. And if you want to message me directly, here is my direct email address. I will reply to every single email. I've had quite a few in the last few weeks, people asking my opinion on certain things. Even if you're in a different country and you want an opinion on something, I will happily provide you with my in-depth and professional knowledge over 20 plus years in this industry. So there we go. What an amazing combination. It has been such a pleasure listening to these this week. I have honestly enjoyed every moment of listening to this Preamp Power combination. I honestly can't wait for us to get our new demonstration units here. So, as ever, thank you for watching this week, and have a great week listening to music. It is the best way for your heart and soul to experience life at its finest. So until next week, please take care.